The crowd laughed as the blade came down. That was the part no one ever talked about. Not the execution. Not the silence afterward. But the laughter. As the blood of the human pooled under his knees, the grand gallery of the Galactic Tribunal echoed with smug applause and thin, amused chuckles. A human envoy, tied like livestock, brought in chains to a stage of judges who spoke 50 languages and shared a single smug belief that Earth was finished. He wasn't a criminal. He was a scapegoat. And the galaxy cheered because they thought it was over. It wasn't. It had just begun. Elias Cade knelt in the center of the Tribunal's platform, sweat and blood tracing together down his torn face. His uniform, once dignified in Earth's navy blue and silver trim, had been shredded by interrogation droids. The Tribunal called him a war agitator, a warmonger, a threat to peace. All he had done was break protocol to save a Terran settlement from a rogue alien siege. He'd fired back when the ceasefire said to stand down. He chose lives over rules, and now they would choose death over reason. The execution wasn't just for punishment. It was for show. One final humiliation to prove that Earth was under the Tribunal's heel. As the presiding judge raised the crystalline blade above his head, a buzzing silence settled across the courtroom. Billions were tuned in across the galaxy. Broadcasted live in hollow feeds, starships, embassies, mining colonies, and entertainment bars. Earth had formally withdrawn all ambassadors hours earlier. The rest of the galactic delegates assumed it was surrender. That Earth had bowed its head. When Elias lifted his own to look straight into the camera lens, his eyes weren't afraid. They weren't pleading. They were warning. The blade dropped. The courtroom erupted in noise, but not for long. On Earth, every satellite feed went black. All communications to off-world outposts shut down. The EarthNet dome went silent across the colonies. In the tribunal chambers, someone noticed first, a faint red dot blinking in the far corner of the execution hall's ceiling. It wasn't security. It wasn't recording. It was watching. On Virex 9, the tribunal's lead broadcaster stepped off set, smirking at the ratings spike. That smirk froze when a data drive labeled E.K0 appeared on her private console, unmarked, unsigned. The video began playing without permission. Her eyes widened. Within seconds, she was on her knees, vomit streaking the floor. The footage was black and white, grainy, shaky, like it had been copied 100 times. It showed a war room, dimly lit, with 4 Terran officers. One spoke into the camera. His voice was dry, commanding, and familiar. Elias Cade. "If this is playing," he said, "I'm already dead. In that case, initiate Protocol 0. Activate Subject 1. The Executioner." In an alien bar on the distant mining moon of Trexel 7, a Terran diplomat was halfway through sipping her drink when a report buzzed into her comms chip. She froze. Then she smiled. "Fools," she whispered, and quietly disappeared from her table. Her drink remained untouched. The bounty hunter beside her never noticed. Back in the Galactic Tribunal's tower, the judges retreated to their chambers, celebrating what they assumed was the turning point of interstellar order. They didn't know that one of their own, Chancellor Rix, had already been marked. His body was found 3 hours later, hung upside down in his quarters, still breathing, but surrounded by a circle of painted glyphs no one could translate. The message carved into the floor beneath him was short. "Justice begins." No cameras caught the intruder. Security footage glitched in 5-minute bursts. One moment, all clear. The next, a man was gone. Then another. By the third disappearance, the tribunal finally acknowledged the whispers that had begun to spread like smoke. Not about Earth declaring war. Not about sanctions. About one man. One myth. They called him the Executioner. 20 years earlier, during the Scorn conflicts, an elite Terran operative had gone dark after a betrayal left his entire unit dead on an alien ice moon. He'd vanished, presumed Kia. But the rumors never stopped. That he resurfaced in war zones where rules were broken. That he didn't serve Earth directly, but followed one code: if justice failed, he would not. His presence was marked by silence, his exits by chaos. No visual recordings existed. No facial ID. Only a name whispered with awe or dread, depending on who you asked. And now, with Elias gone, that name echoed again. The Tribunal dismissed it as paranoia. An Earth ghost story, useful for scaring children and soldiers. But their security teams doubled. Private mercs were hired. Psychic sentries were recruited. Meanwhile, Earth said nothing. Not one public statement. Not one ambassador to plead, threaten, or declare retaliation. Just silence. That silence grew louder when the Tribunal's lead strategist was ambushed in his own shuttle. There were no injuries, no theft. Just a single data chip pinned to his chest with a tactical blade. On it a message. We are not equal. You wear robes. I wear names. You give orders. I carry graves. The Tribunal issued an emergency broadcast. They blamed fringe Terran radicals. They warned Earth to take control of its criminals. They spoke into the cameras with fear hidden behind their pomp. But across the galaxy, people weren't listening to the Tribunal. They were replaying a single file that had been leaked to every back channel and shadow net. It showed Elias Cade and a man beside him. Same height. Similar build. Same eyes. In the footage, the man stood silently while Elias spoke into the lens. You want justice, he said. But your justice is convenience. When you kill one of us to keep the rest quiet, you don't bury peace. You provoke the gravekeeper. I didn't come alone. The last frame before the footage cut showed the second man pulling on a black visor with a white skull painted across it. In the background, the words burned onto steel, Executioner Protocol engaged. And just like that, the game changed. Galactic Order thought Earth would kneel. Instead it watched. Waited. And then, it sent the one man whose file had been erased from every known database. Not because he didn't exist, but because the people who knew how to describe him never lived long enough to write it down. The body of Chancellor Rix was still suspended in his quarters when the Tribunal convened a private emergency session. His pulse was steady, but his eyes wouldn't close. He wasn't unconscious. He was afraid. The glyphs etched beneath his hanging form glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing like a warning beacon from a place long forgotten. Medical droids hovered silently beside him, unsure whether to treat trauma or terror. The guards stationed at his door had no idea how anyone had entered, let alone bypassed bioscanners, retina locks, and 12 levels of encrypted defense grids. The official explanation drafted for the public called it a hallucination brought on by stress. The unofficial conversations held in hushed tones called it something else entirely. A mark. A message. And it wasn't the last. By the next cycle, news of the incident was contained. But containment didn't stop fear. It only bottled it. In the shadow markets of the outer systems, traders passed around footage stolen from hack surveillance cores. Though the Tribunal had scrubbed the execution broadcast from official channels, someone had preserved it. And someone else had layered a new ending onto it. A clip that hadn't aired, one that showed the moment Elias Cade's body hit the platform. But in this version, the screen didn't fade to black. It lingered. Just long enough to show the shimmer of light refracting across a cloaked figure watching from the rafters above the chamber. Barely visible. Just one frame. But enough to freeze every frame analyst in the galaxy. On Earth, the silence remained. Not a single ship left orbit. Not a single diplomat attended any off-world council. But something was moving beneath the surface. A smuggler from Itra 5 claimed a Terran ship had docked at a fuel station with no ID, no logs, and a black paint job so matte it didn't register on most scanners. The crew? Only one man. No face. No voice. Just a helmet and a handprint left on the exit ramp. The handprint was burned into the steel. Not with heat. With pressure. As if the man had pushed gravity into it. Inside the Tribunal's fortress, a young analyst named Mira found herself pulling old files from the war era. She wasn't a believer in myths. She thought war stories were exaggerated by survivors who couldn't cope with what they'd done. But something about the details disturbed her. There were patterns in the archived reports. Blackouts. Officers found without injuries but unable to speak. Battlefields where no weapons had fired, but bodies still fell. A dozen mentions of a codename that was always redacted. Except once. On a field log from the siege of Threskel 4. One word. Executioner. The alien general who had signed that report was retired now, old, slow, and half-drunk in a refugee city outside the Zorlex border. He hadn't spoken of that war in years. But when a reporter found him and asked what he saw back then, the general only muttered one line. I saw the ghost of vengeance wear human skin. Then he begged the reporter to leave and died in his sleep that night, heart stopped by something no skin could detect. Back at the Tribunal headquarters, the paranoia deepened. A second judge found his private skimmer hacked and hovering idle in deep orbit. The navigation logs had been wiped. In its place was a single repeating signal, a pulse tone mimicking a human heartbeat. The frequency wasn't just a sound. It was a war code. The same code used by the original Terran Black Ops division that Elias Cade once commanded. The same one that was shut down after the war and erased from the official record. The implication was clear. Someone had restarted it. Or worse, someone had never let it die. In desperation, the Tribunal hired mercenary protection from the Varn Syndicate. These were soldiers bred for fearlessness, outfitted with the best combat augmentation money could buy. They were deployed to track the executioner. The mission brief was simple: confirm existence, neutralize if possible. They assembled a 10-man team, equipped with psychic dampeners, anti-cloaking drones, and a motion-suppressant gas. They scoured 3 stations where executioner sightings had been reported. At the third, they found what they were looking for. And wished they hadn't. The station was abandoned, power flickering. Inside, they discovered 23 non-lethal takedowns. No bodies. Just unconscious smugglers, pirates, and 1 diplomat, all tied and tagged with biosensors that monitored their vitals. It was surgical. Clean. Terrifying. At the center of the room was a metal case. Inside it, a recording chip. The footage showed the 10-man team entering the station. It was them. But the footage was recorded before they'd arrived. Before they'd even landed. The message that followed was short. I know your boots before they touched the floor. 3 of the 10 left the team that day. They refused payment. They refused to speak. The Varn Syndicate tried to erase the footage, but it was already on the shadow nets. And worse, it was spreading faster than they could contain it. Viewers analyzed the video frame by frame. In the reflection of a broken glass panel, someone spotted the executioner standing behind the camera, motionless, watching. Not breathing. Not moving. Waiting. The Tribunal demanded answers. But the more they tried to contain it, the faster the galaxy turned against them. Civilian networks mocked them. Outer Rim colonies whispered of justice returning. Slaver lords began hiring double protection. Governors on the fringe started canceling travel. Even the pirates backed off human convoys. The executioner wasn't an assassin anymore. He had become a message. Still, the Tribunal refused to admit it. They issued a new order. Earth must surrender the executioner immediately or face unified sanctions. The broadcast was smug, polished, and filled with legal jargon. But Earth said nothing. They didn't blink. Didn't react. Not until the next morning, when a Tribunal freighter drifted into orbit above the capital without comms. Inside, the crew was asleep, sedated. No harm done. No systems broken. But every wall in the freighter had been painted with a single message, handwritten with chalk dust from a Martian school bunker. You executed peace. I execute silence. The galaxy now understood. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't war. It was something colder, older, and far more patient. The Tribunal hadn't just angered Earth. They had woken the one man Earth never wanted to use again. The man they had buried under layers of myth, protocol, and blackout. But myth doesn't bleed. And protocol doesn't leave messages on your doorstep. Only one man does that. The executioner had arrived. And he wasn't just hunting. He was keeping score. The cold metal walls of Outpost Athetherion groaned as the Varn Syndicate's elite kill team descended into the core chamber. They had tracked the executioner's last appearance to this abandoned medical station floating on the edge of the Drenari belt. The station had been dead for years, stripped for parts, and long since forgotten by the central registry. But fresh footprints had been found in the docking bay. Human size. Unmatched to any civilian ID. 10 mercenaries, fully augmented, advanced drone cover, and Neuralinked weapons stood ready. Their orders were simple. Terminate the threat. What they weren't told, or what they refused to believe, was that this wasn't a hunt. It was bait. They split into fire teams, moving through the dusty, echoing corridors with cold precision. Motion sensors pinged nothing. Heat scanners showed only residual warmth. One mercenary, a tall, broad-shouldered Varnian named Krell, paused beside an old cryobed. A name was scratched into the metal with a knife. Elias. Krell didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. Until the lights flickered. Not a power failure. It was synchronized. A pattern. One long pulse. One short. One long. It repeated 3 times before going dark completely. The lead technician swore under his breath. It was an old Terran Morse variant. Translated, it meant one thing. Watching. The kill team's comms burst to life with static, sharp and violent. A voice came through. Not the executioner's. A child's. It was faint, distant, and looping. He's behind you. He's behind you. He's behind you. Each mercenary spun instinctively, weapons drawn. No contact. Just shadows. Just silence. Then a door slid open on its own across the corridor. A room filled with surgical tools and body bags lined the floor. Every bag had a Tribunal crest burned into the zipper. None of them contained bodies. Just red Tribunal robes neatly folded. A message in cloth. Panic broke the formation. 2 mercs bolted back to the shuttle. One made it. The other tripped a pressure trigger. The explosion was clean, silent, controlled. No shrapnel. Just a flash of light that left his body untouched but unconscious. His vitals remained stable. The executioner hadn't killed him. He'd simply turned him off. The message was growing clearer. This wasn't a war. It was a warning. The rest of the team regrouped, and found a locked chamber deeper within the station. On the door, words were carved in Terran Standard. You judge us by rules you wrote in ink. I answer in blood written long before your council. They overrode the lock and stepped inside, weapons raised. It was a trap. Not an explosive, not poison, not gas. Just a single portable console playing a preloaded video. Elias Cade stood beside a masked figure in a snowy field. The wind howled. Behind them, a dozen alien corpses. Elias looked into the lens. If you're seeing this, then you tried to punish Earth for surviving. You executed a man for saving lives. You called that justice. Then let me show you what we call justice. The executioner lifted his head. The mask caught the moonlight. The screen cut to black. Then a single line of white text appeared. You are now on trial. Hours later, the Tribunal received a transmission from the remaining mercenaries. Fragmented. One of them, a female pilot named Vey, was screaming through blood. Not pain. Rage. She described the executioner's movements as inhuman. No footfalls. No breathing. He was there 1 second, gone the next. Her entire perception of combat shattered. She kept shouting the same thing. He didn't shoot. He just stared. When the footage recovered from their body cams was examined, only a few seconds were usable. Blurry shapes. Rapid camera cuts. But one moment stood out. The executioner walked past the hallway, slow and calm. The team fired at him. He didn't dodge. The bullets hit the wall behind him. He was never there. A projection? A decoy? Or just a reminder that if he wanted them dead, they already would be. After the Outpost incident, the remaining Tribunal members went into total lockdown. They relocated to Station Volther, a heavily fortified war structure once used in the Scorn uprising. It was surrounded by defense grids, psychic dampeners, mine layers, and cloaking fields. No unauthorized vessel could even approach without triggering 50 levels of automated retaliation. They declared it the safest place in the quadrant. They were wrong. 3 cycles later, the lead Tribunal tactician received a package on her private desk. No security breach. No logs of entry. The package was unmarked, wrapped in simple cloth. Inside was a set of Terran medals, all belonging to Elias Cade. Stolen from his body after the execution. How they ended up in that room, the Tribunal didn't know. But each medal was bent inward, perfectly circular. As if crushed by fingers. Attached was a note printed on plain paper. Return what was stolen. Or I take what you love. Fear turned to desperation. One member suggested inviting Earth back to negotiations. Another suggested blaming a rogue Terran faction and issuing a universal warrant. The third suggested surrender. They argued for hours. But none of it mattered. That same night, all their personal AI assistants shut down. When they rebooted, a single shared file appeared. A visual overlay of each judge's location during Elias's execution. Complete with timestamps. Labeled observers. The executioner had been tracking them since before they even passed the sentence. A journalist working off-world published a report the next day. It exposed the Tribunal's internal communications, proving they'd ignored exonerating evidence in Elias's trial. The leak included witness statements, suppressed security footage, and a transmission from the alien attackers that confirmed Elias's intervention saved 412 lives. The Tribunal had executed him anyway to protect a political alliance. The galaxy erupted. Riots broke out on several rim colonies. Supporters of Earth flooded networks demanding justice. But it was too late. The Tribunal had already become prey. On a moon near Gorgas Prime, an old scavenger ship found a black box floating in orbit. It contained only a message and coordinates. The message was brief. Tribunal ends where Elias bled. The coordinates led to the moon of Virex 9, the site of the execution. The place had been sealed after the incident, turned into a security outpost. But now, its power was down. Its guards were gone. Only silence remained. When the Tribunal dared to send a probe to the site, it transmitted one image before being destroyed. The execution platform had been rebuilt, but the chains were gone. In their place stood a new figure. A man in black armor. No weapons. No movement. Just watching the stars. Waiting. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He was inviting them back to the scene of their crime. And the Tribunal, for the first time in its long history, had no idea what to do next. Because they'd created a ghost with a name. A ghost who didn't want war. A ghost who wanted them to live long enough to feel every second of fear that Elias Cade never showed them. A ghost in the shape of justice. A man who never raised his voice, but whose silence had become the loudest sound in the galaxy. The executioner had just begun. The broadcast was supposed to be their reassurance, a polished piece of propaganda meant to silence the growing panic spreading across the systems. It began with the Galactic Tribunal's senior chairwoman standing tall in front of a gleaming insignia, surrounded by armed escorts, and the finest recording equipment Galactic credits could buy. Her voice was measured, slow, full of false calm. She spoke of order, of discipline, of the importance of maintaining faith in interstellar law. Earth had failed to cooperate, she said. Earth had broken the pact. And while the Tribunal respected all sovereign systems, there would be consequences. The speech was filled with legal terminology and rehearsed empathy, but every word rang hollow. The galaxy wasn't convinced. And neither was the Tribunal, though they didn't know it yet. Somewhere between the 7th and 8th minute of the broadcast, the lights in the chamber flickered. It was brief. A stutter in the power grid, dismissed as a fluctuation. But then the camera feed twitched. Just once. Then again. The image distorted for a half-second, but when it snapped back into focus, the room seemed different. The chairwoman was still speaking, unaware. The guards were still in place. But something had shifted. In the far left corner of the frame, behind a security rail, a silhouette had appeared. No one had seen him enter. He hadn't moved. But he was there. He was still. He was watching. The camera feed didn't cut immediately. It lingered just long enough for viewers across a dozen planets to realize what they were seeing. A figure in matte black armor, with a pale mask and the unmistakable symbol of a white skull on his chest, stood motionless behind the tribunal. Not a guard. Not part of the entourage. He wasn't supposed to be there. And by the time someone inside the room noticed, the lights went out. Silence followed. Not just in the room, but across the entire network. Every communication line connected to the Tribunal's station dropped. Civilian channels went black. Military nodes returned only static. For 5 straight minutes, no one in the galaxy heard a sound. On Earth, every screen simply displayed a single message in Terran font. Sentence suspended. Trial reopened. When the feed returned, it was no longer coming from the Tribunal's official relay. It came from the executioner's own stream. No one knew how it was accessed. No one knew how it bypassed security. But the image was clear. The tribunal members, all 6, sat bound to their own judgment seats. The same chairs they had used to sentence Elias Cade to death. Their mouths were sealed with transparent biogel. Their wrists shackled, not harshly, but firmly. They were not injured. They were not harmed. But they were helpless. The executioner stood at the center of the platform. No weapon in hand. No army behind him. Just silence. He raised one hand, and a hologram blinked to life above him. It showed the footage of Elias Cade's trial. The real one. Not the broadcast version, but the unedited stream. It showed the cross-examinations, the dismissed evidence, the suppressed witness accounts. It showed the tribunal overriding objections, silencing diplomats, and eventually sealing the verdict before deliberation had even ended. The room watched itself commit a farce. The galaxy watched it with them. As the footage ended, another projection emerged. It showed colony reports from the outpost Elias had defended. Names. Ages. Families. All allied because he had broken orders. Because he had chosen humanity over protocol. The projection lingered on one child's face, smiling from a makeshift refugee camp. Then it shut off. The executioner finally moved. Not to the judges. Not toward the cameras. Instead, he stepped aside. A new figure walked forward from the shadows. A child. The same one from the projection. Not a hologram. Real. He held a datapad in his small hands. The executioner knelt and took it gently. The boy stepped back, expression solemn. From the datapad, the executioner read out a message. It was not a speech. It was a statement. Elias Cade was executed under false pretense. He saved lives and was punished by cowards wearing the robe of law. You did not uphold peace. You traded it for control. You denied evidence. You manipulated truth. And now you will not die. You will serve. You will remember. At those words, the lights returned in full. The tribunal members, still bound, were lifted from their seats by automated platforms and lowered beneath the floor. The camera followed. Beneath the judgment hall, a chamber had been transformed. Not a prison. A courtroom. But this time, for real trials. They were no longer judges. They were witnesses. They would sit through every hearing. They would see every story. They would hear every plea for justice from those they had ignored. They would spend the rest of their lives doing what they had refused to before. Listening. The feed cut to a final message. Earth does not destroy. Earth remembers. Across the galaxy, reactions exploded. Some called it poetic. Some called it calculated. Some demanded answers. Others celebrated. But none denied what had happened. The executioner had dismantled the system without firing a single shot. He had not killed his enemies. He had removed their power. And in doing so, reshaped the balance of fear. Stations that once allied themselves with the Tribunal began severing ties. Independent colonies reached out to Earth for new dialogue. Former outlaws and exiles began retelling stories of how Elias Cade had saved them, protected them, honored promises the Tribunal had abandoned. And through it all, Earth maintained its silence. It offered no statement. No rebuttal. No praise. It let the galaxy speak for itself. In a war council on the Outer Rim, a high-ranking general of the Trell Dominion slammed his fist on the table and demanded retaliation. No one agreed. Not because they were loyal to Earth, but because they feared what might come next. If the executioner could bring down the Tribunal, what would he do to a military regime? Back in the Tribunal station, the chamber was converted permanently into a new justice archive. The Tribunal's crimes, rulings, and manipulations were projected continuously, open to any visitor. The former judges became silent fixtures of a world that no longer trusted them. As for the executioner, he vanished once again. No ship seen. No trace left behind. Only the ghost of his mask, burned into the memory of a galaxy that had finally begun to question the laws it once obeyed blindly. He had not come to lead. He had come to remind them that power, when unearned, was just fear in disguise. And now, fear had a new name. On a quiet field at the edge of a Terran reserve, far from city lights and satellite paths, 2 graves rested beneath a line of old stone pines. The grass here grew wild and uneven, left untouched by regulation drones or memorial caretakers. One headstone was etched with a name known across the stars: Elias Cade. Diplomat. Commander. Defender. Martyr. The second stone stood beside it, smaller, simpler, with no ornate carvings or national insignias. Just a name. Cade. No rank. No titles. No dates. But the locals knew. They always had. Veterans came here in silence. Survivors brought their children to walk the trail. There were no ceremonies, no cameras. Just stories told in low voices. They said the man buried next to Elias had no official history, no records, no medals. Only rumors. Rumors that said when justice failed, he did not. The wind that moved through the trees carried old echoes, sounds that no one could trace and no device could capture. The executioner was gone. But his silence remained. It had become something the galaxy could not unhear. In the weeks following the Tribunal's downfall, reforms spread like fire. Planetary governors reevaluated their courts. Entire bureaucracies collapsed under the weight of their own secrets. Those who once feared retribution now feared accountability. The galaxy did not become peaceful overnight, but it became aware. That was the first step. Earth never claimed victory. They issued no celebrations, no press conferences. The silence continued, but now it echoed differently. It wasn't retreat. It was resolve. In a training compound beneath Mars Colony 4, young cadets sat in a circular classroom lined with relics from the old wars. Their instructor, a one-eyed colonel with scars down his jaw, held up a rusted black helmet with a pale skull painted across the faceplate. No one spoke as he turned it slowly in his hands. He told them it wasn't a symbol of fear. It was a mask worn by a man who chose justice over vengeance. Who chose restraint over power. The students listened with wide eyes, some skeptical, some inspired. He told them the man who wore it never gave speeches. Never asked for loyalty. He earned it without a word. And when he vanished, he left behind a galaxy better than the one he found. On the shadow nets, debates still raged. Some believed the executioner had never existed at all. They claimed he was an Earth-born myth, a fabrication used to dismantle galactic authority. Others insisted he was a weapon too dangerous to remain free. But in the outer colonies, people spoke of him like a force of nature. Unseen but ever present. A warning to those who abused power. A promise to those denied it. The legend grew, not with exaggeration, but with precision. Every story was different. But every story ended the same. He never took more than necessary. And he never returned to the same place twice. On Virex 9, the site of the original execution, the tribunal platform remained untouched. Converted into a memorial, it no longer bore the emblems of a fallen regime. Instead, it displayed the faces of those who had been silenced over the years. Civilians. Whistleblowers. Defenders like Elias. The platform became sacred ground not because of what had happened there, but because of what followed. People from across the systems left tokens, fragments of truth, pieces of uniforms, old datapads filled with suppressed testimony. It was no longer a monument to fear. It was a marker for change. The boy who had delivered the datapad to the executioner during the final broadcast was now enrolled in Earth's diplomatic academy. He never spoke about that day. But when asked why he chose diplomacy instead of law enforcement or military command, he only said one thing. Because some ghosts were masked to protect the living, not to haunt the guilty. The tribunal members who once presided over galactic justice remained under house arrest in a secluded research station. They were given access to reading, access to conversation, and mandatory sessions with those they had once condemned. It wasn't prison. It was perspective. Over time, some of them broke down and admitted what they'd done. Others maintained their pride. But none of them ever saw another courtroom again. Their words no longer carried weight. Their power was dismantled not by weapons or armies, but by proof and pressure. The kind that only one man had the patience to deliver. In a former slave report on the dark side of Relenos 3, a bar owner closed up shop one night and found a package outside her door. Inside was a long-lost necklace belonging to her sister, stolen during the evacuation of her home planet. The necklace had been taken by a tribunal ally who later disappeared under suspicious circumstances. No note accompanied the package. But the security footage showed a cloaked figure walking away from the door seconds before it appeared. She called out, but no one turned back. Some debts weren't paid with money. They were paid with closure. Rumors persisted for years that the executioner had settled on a nameless moon. That he walked its forests alone. That he helped repair mining rigs by night, and taught children how to build traps by day. No one ever confirmed these stories. No one ever tried too hard. The galaxy understood something unspoken. He didn't want praise. He didn't need permission. He had never asked for forgiveness because he had never broken a vow. He had only ever enforced one. There was a time when the galaxy laughed as a man died for doing the right thing. That time had passed. The laughter had stopped. The laws had changed. And the stars, once cold and indifferent, now bore the weight of one man's silence. Justice no longer wore golden robes. It didn't sit behind desks or hide behind screens. Justice walked. It listened. It watched. And sometimes, late at night, on an isolated space lane with no registered traffic, pilots swore they saw a ship with no beacon and no call sign glide silently across their path. No lights. No noise. Just a matte black hull and a skull on its bow. By the time they blinked, it was gone. Maybe it was a myth. Maybe it was a warning. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a reminder that the executioner was never about revenge. He was about remembering what justice was supposed to feel like.